You use the resources, you pay them, and the job is done. It's just like a power distribution companies, like in UP and Delhi and NCR. We have the discoms, distribution companies. So the electricity supply is coming to your home. Now, when you use the electricity, your consumption varies from summer to winters. In winters, it is low because ACs are not running, but in summers, it's very high. So the more the amount of resources you use, more amount of money you pay back to the discom, the distribution companies, which in this case is the cloud service providers. So if you're using just two virtual machines, 4 GB of the hard disk space and 6 GB of the RAM, you will be charged accordingly. But if I say, let's say I want to use 10 virtual machines, 15 GB of the RAM, 16 GB of the RAM, 32 GB of the hard disk, or 64 GB of the hard disk, I will be billed accordingly. So I will show you that cost calculator wherein you can do the calculation on your own, that this is what I want and this is what I have to pay back to the cloud service provider. You use the resources, you pay them, and the job is done. And it's just like a power distribution company. You use the resources, UP and pay them, and the job is done. You are the discoms. It's just like a power distribution company. So the electricity supply is coming to your home because you are the discoms, distribution companies. Cloud-based services. So the electricity supply is coming to your home. Megraj. Now, when you use the electricity, your consumption varies from summer to winters. When we talk about in winters, it is low because one is the software as a service. So in summers, it's very high. So the more the amount of resources you use, more amount of money you pay are the slides moving and the voice on the distribution companies, which in this case is a cloud service provider. So if you're using just two virtual machines and 4 GB of the hard disk space and 6 GB of the RAM, you will be charged accordingly. But if I say, let's say I want to use 10 virtual machines, 15 GB of the RAM, 16 GB of the RAM, 32 GB of the hard disk, or 64 GB of the hard disk, I will be billed accordingly. So I will show you the cost calculator wherein you can do the calculation on your own, that this is what I want and this is what I have to pay.
Which together control almost 80% of the revenue
you pay them,
that get generated in the IT industry. Because these are all in the last few years, almost everyone was hooked to the net. Somebody or other was browsing with their consumption. Many number of the official meetings, the academic sessions, the lectures, everything was conducted online. And the people who were not the part of the IT were watching the web series on the internet. So huge amount of data consumption was there, huge amount of data sharing was there. And this helped these companies to have a good amount of the profit at the end of the financial year. So here, the software is being provided free of cost as a service to the end user. So here, the consumer is using the provider's application free of cost because cash we don't charge money by and large, it's free of cost given to the end users. And the applications are all accessible.
15 GB of the RAM, 16 GB of the RAM, 32 GB of the hard disk, or 64 GB of the hard disk. I will be billed accordingly. So I will show you the cost calculator wherein you can do the calculation on your own, that this is what I want and this is what I have to pay.
Which together control almost 80% of the revenue
you pay them and the job is done. And this is like a power distribution company. You use the resources, you pay them and the job is done. You are the discoms. This is like a power distribution company.
Many number of the official meetings, the academic sessions, the lectures, everything was conducted online. And the people who were not the part of the IT were watching the series on the provider, and he's saying that I want to do something. For example, I want to download the WinZip and WinRAR software. So they're all free of cost. I don't have to pay anything to download WinZip and WinRAR. They fall in the category of software as a service. Software is being provided as a service to the end user. So there is a concept called free and open source, FOSS, free and open source software, FOSS. Free means free to use. Open source means free plus. They share the code to you. You can modify the code, manipulate the code, edit the code, append the code. You can do anything. So code is available to you free of cost. For example, if you're working Linux, Linux flavors like Ubuntu, Fedora, Gentoo, many number of the Linux flavors are there. You can download the code. The kernel level code is there. You can download the code on your system. And if you want to modify, you can go ahead and modify the code, but on your local system, not at the global servers as such. So in the open source, it is a free, plus the code is being shared, code is being distributed.
among the community of developers who can contribute to the code, who can enhance the code, who can modify, play with the system, he can play with the network. And this just like we have good users, we have got bad users. So hackers and crackers both dominate the industry for that matter. But in the SaaS, primary objective is provide the services to the end user. Don't charge anything. But that having said that, that does not mean every service under SaaS is free. It depends upon the cloud service providers. But SaaS paradigm says it's a first level of service, so you provide as free of cost, don't do the billing. But yes, no hard and fast rule. The cloud service provider can even charge for it. Let's say they say, I will provide certain software free of cost, not for the lifetime, but for 15 days period. So it depends upon the company, what they're into. For example, when we go for the writing the code of the XML, extensible markup language, we use the Oxygen XML IDE, Integrated Development Environment tool. Now the company provides that Oxygen XML editing software free of cost, academic edition for 30 days. So they don't provide for the entire month or year or lifetime. So they are providing a software as a service, but for a limited duration of time, so the end user can get familiarized with the concepts. And then if they are interested, they can buy the premium edition or the enterprise edition of the same software. So that's how the software as a service goes as a paradigm. Moving on, we come to the next level of service in the cloud computing domain, which is a platform as a service. Now here we are providing certain thing more to the user. We are giving more empowerment to the user to play with the things. So the capability provided to the consumer is to deploy. Now what we are going to deploy? The softwares, the applications, right? So capability provided to the consumer is to deploy onto the cloud infrastructure. Consumer created, means developer has written the code for it, or acquired application. For example, you have purchased an application from some of the IT companies which have been created using the certain programming languages and tools which should be supported by the cloud service provider on which you are planning to host an application. Because you need to identify the application and then you should decide where to host it and what is the billing cycle according to it, right? So the consumer here also does not manage or control the underlying cloud infrastructure. Or struts or spring on an MVC architecture. So on the view layer, I have got the JSP program running smoothly. On the controller layer, I have got the servlet program or the enterprise Java Beans program. And on the model layer, I have got a MongoDB for database connectivity. So I've got three technologies working on it. Now I have designed a website or I have written enterprise applications on this basic framework, and I want to host it not on my machine, but onto the server of the cloud service provider, because I want all the people around the world, the millions of customers around the world, to access my application. If I will host it locally, they won't be able to do it. So I need to host on some platform, I need to buy the space, the web space on the hard disk of certain cloud service provider, wherein I will go and host my application. So I have designed an application, the advanced Java application, and I go to the cloud service provider and I say, this is my application and you please provide me with the servers. So server like Apache Tomcat, BA WebLogic server, the JBoss server will be provided by the cloud service providers at their end. So I will connect using a virtual private network, VPN tunnel gets established, and I go and connect to the cloud service provider and I host my application there. And then I make my application live, and the millions of customers around the world, I will share my domain name or the URL, and now they can access my application, right? So in software as a service, we are not talking of the development of an application, hosting of an application, writing a code. We are only talking of free softwares are being provided to you. Or if you are more towards the development side, certain open source software will be provided to you. But in the case of platform as service, we only talk of the real-time projects, real-time enterprise applications. Suppose I have my own company and I've got a team of developers who are designing a cloud-based applications. Once they have done it, I've got it tested. So for the testing of an application, again, when we say testing, we use the word penetration testing, PT.
or rather full word is a VAPT, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So I need to test my application thoroughly for the possible vulnerabilities which might be there in it. Because if the vulnerabilities remain in the application, then the hackers around the world will launch the attacks and then they will tear off my application threadbarely. So the cloud service provider says, before you come to us for hosting of an application, make sure your application is safe to host. So we say STH, safe to host. So what does that mean? The company has to get a safe to host certificate for their application which they would like to share or distribute among the cloud service provider or to host on the cloud service provider. So there are many companies in India like NIC, TCS, CDEF who are into this business of providing a safe to host certificate. So they will thoroughly check your application for possible vulnerabilities. Because if the vulnerabilities remain there, then the hacker will launch massive attacks on your website or the application, like brute force attack, dictionary attack, man in the middle attack, modification, repudiation. Many active and passive attacks are there. They can launch the application and they can capture the data. So all these cloud service providers says that you get a safe to host certificate from any of these impaneled companies, provide it to us, and then only we are going to make your application live. Then only the user can access it. So here you are the developer, you have got a company, you are designing an application. For example, you can also design an application on .NET architecture. You have written the code in the Visual C# .NET, or maybe you have designed a website using ASP.NET with a backend using ADO.NET, and then you want to host it onto the ADO.NET server, the IIS server, which is being provided by the cloud service provider. So server, they will provide, application is all yours. You go there, you get your application hosted only for a defined duration. So because everything is paid here, you will have to pay for the amount of time you want to make your application live onto that particular cloud service provider. Now we can take another example to make the things clear between the software as a service and the platform as a service. In software as a service, you are more like an end user, end viewer. For example, if you want to buy a ticket, you want to watch a movie, you buy a ticket, you go to the theater and the movie is beamed to you. Now it may happen that initial 20-30 minutes you enjoy the movie, but thereafter you may not still enjoy it. So the entity is provided to you as such. Now if you really enjoy, you will sit there for 2 hours. If you don't enjoy, you will say it's a waste of time. Why to waste the time? Let's move on. So it depends upon the particular customer or the end user, what is his frame of mind. So he can move around, he can go out, he can quit the movie because nobody is forcing him. But initially he has shown his interest that I would like to watch a movie. He paid the ticket for it. So he is more like an end user who is paying 200 rupees or 150 rupees to the producer of that movie that I am interested in entertainment, I am visiting a theater, I am paying you the money, you provide me the entertainment as such. So here it's not free, it's a paid entity. But just like the Doordarshan channel is there, there are many free to air channel is there. You're not paying anything to them. The service is being provided to you free of cost. So you can open the TV and the content will be shared for you. You can see the content, you can view the content, but you cannot modify the content. That is not permission given to you. You can only be a viewer, not the modification. But suppose you are a very critical user. You say, okay, I did not like the movie, but I still want to raise my voice. You go to any of the social network platforms like LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you want. And then you post certain views that I did not like this thing about the application, but I like this thing about the application. So you have become a party to the entire process wherein you are moving from the software as a service to a platform as a service. You want your voice to be heard. You want to have the say in the things which are happening. So you are no longer just like a naive user in the software as a service. Here you are paying. So since you are paying, you want to have your voice heard by the cloud service provider or by the entertainment industry or by the producer of the movie. So you have moved one step ahead. If you are a free consumer, you are consuming the data free of cost, nobody will listen to you for that matter. But yes, if you're paying for the service and then you say something, people will listen to you because you have paid and now you're a subscriber and now you want your voice to be heard for that matter. So we have platform as a service is better than the software as a service. But here also you cannot change the things. But yes, you want your voice to be heard and that will be heard for that matter. And your feedback will be taken into account for improving the services. Last very popular feature is infrastructure as a service, where everything is being given to you and you can design the concepts, you have a full say in everything. So consumer is able to deploy and run system software as well as application software, which include everything, the operating system and the other enterprise applications. And the consumer here also, we will not allow to have the say, we're allowed to have the say from the network point of view, from the operating system point of view. But here cloud infrastructure will still be controlled by the cloud service provider. But user has a control over the operating system, the storage application, the deployed application, and the selective or some maybe more than that, depending on the payment you are doing. You have a control over the firewalls, the UTM software and hardware, what we call Unified Threat Management System based software and hardware, and the routers, switches, gateways, bridges, various kind of the network devices. So in the infrastructure service, you are a viewer of an application, you are a developer of an application, you can host your application onto the servers provided by the cloud service providers, as well as you will have a full control over the entire infrastructures. That includes the firewalls, the IP addresses which are going to be issued, the control, the management of the routers, the switches, the gateways, and the hubs and everything. So, but still then, the cloud service provider will have the final call on the things because it is his business. You are paying, fine enough, but then what all should be provided to you, what all should not be provided to you, what should be the billing cycle, how many number of users can access the content on your web servers, is a session going to be created, are the session going to be tracked, are the cookies allowed to be get created on your website or not. So these are still the critical fine points which the cloud service provider still controls the things. But still we say in the infrastructure service, cloud service provider has been a very liberal in providing almost everything. So you demand for the resources and they will be happy to provide the resources to you because you are ready to pay. So just like in the software service, majority of the concepts are free of cost, majority of software are free of cost, but in the platform as a service, we move from the free concept to the paid concept. Though the charging period, the billing cycle is still minimal, not high. And you have been given a right to design an application, to develop an application, to deploy the application on your servers, that's fine, that's your server, but also on the servers of the cloud service providers. And the people around the world can now log into that your application and then can access the content which you would like to share. Maybe a static website or maybe a dynamic website, it all depends upon you. And then we have got an infrastructure. Infrastructure is more like you have a softwares, the system softwares, you've got application softwares, you've got a network infrastructures, you've got the operating system control. You can have a control that you want your operating system to be Mac OS or Sun Solaris or OS2 or Windows on the cloud service provider end. You can design your database that whether you want MySQL or non-SQL databases to be there for your applications. You can have a say over the MVC architecture application which you want to host on the cloud service provider. So here the user has got a much larger say in the design, development and deployment of an application which was not there in the case of the platform as a service. So SaaS is by and large free. In the case of the PaaS, yes, it is let's say 1 rupee per hour. But in the infrastructure, the IES, it's almost 5 rupees to 10 rupees per hour, depending upon the kind of resources you want. So that can be provided to you depending on a billing cycle, depending on a payment cycle. And it can be shared across multiple number of the users. So, but still, the control point will be the cloud service provider. We cannot bypass. We are using his resources. He is providing the resources to him. Now, moving on, we have got certain peripheral computing that have emerged over a period of time from the cloud computing domain. We have got like dew computing, we have got a edge computing, we have got a fog computing, we have got a fluid computing. Many kind of the computings have actually emerged over a period of time. Like I will just share very small because again they will become very lengthy and we might outreach the time of the lecture, the talk. So I'll just share a few definition of word for them. Dew computing is more like droplets. That means a data. So dew computing comprises the core concept of the cloud computing with the capabilities of the end devices. Means end devices like my laptops, my PDAs, my mobile phones, desktop PCs, they are the end devices.
So if you're doing a computing onto the end devices, we say edge computing because it's the edge of the network. So when we use the word edge computing, this includes a mixture of the heterogeneous operating systems, the Sun Solaris, the Mac, the OS2, the Windows, the Linux, the Red Hat Linux, and many other kind of OS, and the thick and thick platforms such as laptops, mobile phones, and the PDA. So computing onto the edge, or like a graph theory, we've got a leaf nodes. So here also your node is at the edge of a network. If you're doing a computing at your system and you are the last node in the entire network, we call it edge computing. But the messages, the packets, the data which are being getting generated from your system moving over the network, more like a droplets, because when you cloud burst take place, the water droplets come down. So more we are referring to that kind of dew. So small, minute water droplets. So these are the data messages, the data packets. So something what we call messages, the packets in the networks, normal network domain, what Tenenbaum and Behrus Forzan teaches us. Here we refer to the dew. Just like you would have seen when the cricket matches take place in the day and night. In the night, whichever team bats second, they always suffer for the loss of runs because there's so much dew on the ground. The tiny water droplets have come over because of the seasonal changes, and the movement of the ball gets affected. The ball does not reach to the boundary so quick, so often. So that's what the dew. Dew here refer to my small size data packets which are flowing onto the network. Edge means computing onto the edge or the last device of the network. For that's from where the word edge has actually came in. Then we go to fog computing. Edge computing means you are doing computing at the last node, last hop of the network. But if you want to do the intermediate computing over the network, then we use the word fog computing. So fog computing or fog networking, which is also known as fogging, is an architecture that uses the edge devices to carry out substantial amount of the computation. That is what we say the word edge computing, the storage of the data, and the communication on the backbone network. Communication means from your device to your cloud service provider. Now, by the time it reaches to the cloud service provider, we'll have multiple number of routers, switches, and gateways through which the data will move, through which the data will become forwarded to reach to the cloud service provider. So if you're doing a computing not on the edge of the network, but on the network, on the intermediate devices of a network, we use the word fog computing. So it's a computing over the network. That's fog computing. Computing on the leaf nodes or the last node of a network is called edge computing. And the kind of messages, the data packets that move between the nodes of a network, we use the word dew computing. So that's how the CDEF computing has emerged. Cloud computing, which is the main computing paradigm, that is actually the everything. And these are small technical buzzwords or definition that has come, a small offshoots which has just emerged from the cloud computing, like the dew computing, the edge computing, and the fog computing. Now there is a very good diagram which I found on the web, which talks of many of these computing paradigm in a single stroke. So if you look right at the top, I think this diagram should be a good diagram to have a basic understanding of the concepts. You have the cloud computing, fog computing, the roof computing. Roof computing is also a type of the edge computing. So here, this is a diagram that includes the IoT applications which are being shared or distributed over the cloud computing domain. So here we can see the users, maybe a technical user or a non-technical user or a security companies like IB and RAW who are transferring the data. And they're all the IoT applications running on the topmost layer. Then you move down and you come to this cloud layer, which is being shown in the yellow color. It's called Universal Communication Platform. Now here cloud computing start emerging. So you are going, now it will ask the user what kind of application you are trying to host. Maybe a smart city based or a smart healthcare, because nowadays a lot of computation is being done onto the hospital network. Just like if you have heard them, Government of India launched the Ayushman Bharat scheme, where many number of the downtrodden people, the economically weaker section of society, they have been issued the Aadhaar card and the Ayush card, and through with the help of which they can go to the primary healthcare centers, to the local district hospitals, to the city hospitals, and they are providing the services almost free of cost, if not with bare minimal cost. So smart healthcare system is there, not for the rich and high size people, but for the low people who cannot afford that much amount of the money for getting the cost-based services. Or maybe it's any of the applications, just like we call mobile ad hoc networks or the VANETs, vehicular ad hoc network. So internet of the vehicle is there. So point I'm trying to say, you have to tell to the cloud service provider that what kind of application you are planning to host onto their end. So it's already shared. IoT is just an example for it. Could be any kind of the application, IoT or the non-IoT based on application. Then on the third layer, we have got a fog computing. So these are the nodes which are being shown here. Now they can be routers, switches, gateways, or maybe just normal other nodes, intermediate nodes who are doing the processing of the data. So these are all fog computing which is getting done. Now here, it could be just an example of the routing, sharing, distributing, route through this server, route through that server. So many kind of the Cisco routing protocols are there which can be easily be made to work in a fog computing domain. Then you move to the last layer, the access computing here, IoT access gateways. So here GWs are there, where gateways are, GW is a gateway. Roof computing is a real on-time, on-site operation facilitation computing. So it's a kind of the edge computing. And here we can see all roof computing happening here. And finally, we have got a multiple number of the small node being a part of the WSense, the wireless sensor access networks or actor network for that matter. So many kind of the technologies work in coherence with each other to make sure that the data is safely, securely distributed over the network, hosted onto the servers, and the user should not feel it. For the user, it should be quick. User is not the end user is not interested in knowing these terms, what is edge computing, what is fog computing, what is cloud computing. He wants a quick access to resources. So if you are watching a web series over the Netflix or Amazon, it's all being shared. It's all being distributed over the cloud-based services. And you really come to know, yes, if certain delay happens, then yes, you can come to know that things are not, there is some problem there. Now delay could be at your end, the edge. For example, if I'm using my handsets, it's an edge node. If I'm watching my television, it's again an edge node, because I am the last consumer of the data in my branch of the tree. After that, nobody else is going to consume for that matter. So here I'm the end user. So this is what the edge computing. When you carry out the processing of the data over the network between the nodes, between the client and the server. Between the nodes, between the two ends, you are getting computing of the data on the router, switches, gateways, any kind of the IoT hubs could be there. We refer to the words fog computing. So fog computing is a part of the cloud computing domain. It's not a separate entity altogether. It's just a periphery or the offshoots of the cloud computing which have emerged over a period of the time. So I think this diagram should give idea. You are at the edge. Now here we are the edge here. These are the sensor nodes. Now sensor node could be deployed in the real-time environment. For example, if you want to have an application like I can take an example. I want to design an IoT application for monitoring the temperature, pressure, and the humidity in the Jaisalmer district of the Rajasthan from the period 1st June to 7th of June. So what I've said, I've specified my requirement. The 7 days period in the hot June, then I say I want to have the real-time data. What kind of data? Atmospheric temperature, pressure, humidity, soil condition for that much amount of duration in the Jaisalmer district or the Balmer district of the Rajasthan. So I carry out the deployment of the nodes, the IoT nodes. So there are many companies like Texas Instrument is there in Bangalore, and Delhi also got Eigen Technologies, which provides with the radio module, the gateway modules, and you can carry out the deployment of an nodes on all